Let's get right down to it. Does size actually matter? When it comes to your houseplants, I'm going to argue that yes, it does. This is Cece from One Green Pea, and today I want to talk to you about how size is a really important consideration for you to make in your houseplant collection. When it comes to bringing plants into your home, there are a lot of choices to be made. There are an unlimited number of varieties of plants, different styles of plants, standing plants, climbing plants, trailing plants, flowering plants, plants of different color. But one option that we don't talk a lot about is size, and the size of your plant matters. Now, there are benefits to both smaller plants and larger plants, and let's just go through a quick list of those right now. As far as smaller plants, the number one difference is their size. They take up less space in your home, and therefore maybe you have an ideal location for that plant that's a little bit smaller. They also tend to cost less, so that's just a benefit, but also you may be wanting a particularly rare plant, something that's on your wish list, and a smaller size might be more affordable. And as far as affordable goes, they also consume less resources. It's a smaller pot, less soil, less water, and all of those things are rather expensive. It's also fun to nurture a small plant and grow it into its adult form. Another benefit of a smaller plant is that it is more adaptable, less stuck in its ways, and so is able to adapt from the conditions that it started in, perhaps a nursery or a plant shop, and adapt to the conditions you have for it at home. So those are all the positive benefits of smaller plants. There's a lot to be said for larger plants as well. Now, although they do take up more space, the look of a larger plant tends to be a little less cluttered than a grouping of smaller plants. They also kind of lend an instant jungle vibe or green vibe to your home, if that's what you're looking for. One of the biggest benefits that, in my mind, is that they're more tolerant to abuse and neglect. For instance, they have a larger root mass, so perhaps you've overwatered your plant and maybe some of the roots die off from rot. It's harder to kill a big plant. They've got more roots, so it's probably going to survive some amount of neglect and abuse. They also have more leaf mass, so they're better able to photosynthesize. So maybe need a little bit less light. They could be a little farther from the light source. So there are benefits to both. One of the big things that I want to talk about today, though, are the care differences between a smaller plant and a larger plant, even of the same species. The differences in care needs really boil down to these three factors in my mind. Number one, the smaller plant is going to need more light. There is less leaf mass to photosynthesize, so it's going to need more light. Number two, the soil is going to dry out faster. They're going to need water more often. And number three, they're more susceptible to pests. So if there is an infestation of pests on a smaller plant, it's probably going to succumb faster than a larger plant, just simply because the percentage of leaves affected is likely to be more on a smaller plant. Now, let's look at some specific varieties that I have both small and large plants of and talk about specifics. The first plant variety I want to talk about in comparing large to small is the Pilea Peperomioides. This Pilea is rather large and has been a great grower so far. It is growing both tall and full, which I really appreciate. Now, he doesn't need a ton of light. He likes bright, light, but very indirect light. So he's back in a corner. Now, this younger one, which is actually one of his babies, does need more light. Now, Pilea don't like direct light on their leaves or else they fade out, which is happening just a little bit with this one. So I really have to monitor getting it enough light for photosynthesis, but not too much so that the leaves bleach out. As far as watering goes, the larger Pilea can go a little bit longer and prefers to go a little longer in between waterings, whereas this one just simply dries out more quickly. I haven't had any pest problems, thank goodness, on my little one, but I did on this larger guy. I had a little bit of scale issues, and so I dealt with that by scraping, removing what I could, and some of the more affected leaves, I actually just removed them. Again, he's a nice full plant, so it didn't hurt the plant in terms of photosynthesis or the overall look of the plant. So that's just one variety of plant. Let's switch gears and talk about a different plant variety entirely, and that is succulents. This big pot here is an aloe plant, obviously, and because he is a large plant in a large pot, he can go weeks, 2 to 3 weeks without water. I don't have to worry about him very often at all, and I can tell when he needs water because he starts getting kind of wimpy and bending in the middle of the leaves. Now this is a tiny little plant, a pot of succulents, and despite it being a succulent, we hear don't overwater your succulents or water every few weeks to a month. Now this little plant needs watered at least once a week. It's a tiny pot, there's not a lot of soil, and there's also no drainage here. So I water this pretty frequently. I would say every 5 to 7 days. And I can tell when I haven't watered because the leaves on the succulents kind of start to get wrinkly and droopy. And I just published a little reel to my Instagram if you want to see some great examples of a succulent that needs watered. I want to finish up by talking about another plant that I have 2 different sizes of. That is the ficus. This is a Ficus benjamina, and this plant has had robust growth. It's been very healthy and a wonderful houseplant. I've had some issues with it. It went through a period of being rather underwatered soon after I got it, and I lost a lot of leaves, thought I had killed it, but it came back gloriously. And in fact, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I had a period of leaf drop, but it wasn't a significant amount, and you can see that he has bounced back beautifully. Now, contrast that to this little guy. This is my Ficus sagittata, which is very similar to a benjamina, but given the size, he's been rather troublesome for me. Now, I underwatered this plant dramatically. I talked about this in my last video. In fact, I did it twice. He was in a place where I didn't see him regularly, and so I kind of forgot about him a little bit, and has lost most of its leaves. And the leaves, the big leaves that it has, are brown and crispy. Now, he is coming back. There is tiny leaf growth on there, and I'm taking much better care of him, watering a lot more often, whereas I water my large benjamina 1 to 2 weeks, 7 to 10 days. I would say this little guy is more on the 3 to 5 day schedule. It's in a much smaller pot, and although I don't want to overwater and rot the tiny little roots that are there, it also has shown me it doesn't like to dry out. And I have him covered in a plastic bag. If you had a nice, beautiful glass cloche, that would work as well, but I'm trying to keep humidity high for this little guy so that he can bounce back. So sometimes the smaller plants, even though they're adorable, can be a lot harder to take care of. Thank you for watching my video. I hope that I gave you some things to think about upon bringing more plants into your home, or even just the care and maintenance of the ones you have now. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with other plant friends in your community. And as always, my dear plant friends, let's keep growing together a greener world.